So in this tutorial, it's very quick. We're going to do a Maya play blast. And what that means is basically instead of having to render every single individual frame and output, because what happens, as we could probably see here, is that when I render my file, it's about 15 seconds long to render. So if we multiply that by 24 or how many frames you have, it can easily eat up a lot of time if you just want to get a quick idea of what it looks like. But in real time. The situation in this case is I have this little guy, he is a little wisp, moves around, but when I play it back, it kind of skips frames, and that's a big problem. Because, I'm a detailed guy, I want to see how this animates, I want to get a sense of motion, and this is not quite doing it for me, although this is trying to render in real time. The other is that you might have scene files that are very large, so to play back at all might be a big issue. So how do you do something that's in between a render and then, individual frames within Viewport? Well, it's something called a play blast. The play blast, if you right-click on your timeline, is the bottom option in your window, and then you click the option box, and you get all these little options. Quite basically, show ornaments. If it's on, it's basically talking about things like this: high quality, perspective, what type of view actually affects the perspective. Typically, I turn those off unless you want to record what it is. I typically render off screen, and I'll show you later why. You can do multi-camera output, which is fantastic. You have a choice between doing image or MOV file or QuickTime file. For people on PCs, it's AVI. You'll have an option for encoding. In this case, I choose H.264. Quality just affects how large the file will be and the quality of the render, or at least the codec compression. Display size. Now, you have an option. You have from window, render settings, custom. Window will do whatever this resolution is. From render settings, it will do whatever your render settings contains in terms of resolution. So mine is 960 by 540. And then custom is, well, as you can imagine, you just enter it right here. I typically like to do it from my render settings. Scale, what this means is that you could do, let's say if your render settings was 256 by 256, you do it by half, it'll do it by half of that number. So it'll be 128 by 128. To keep things simple, I'll keep it up 1. Frame padding, if you had it on image, it'll basically add a, frame 1, frame 2, frame 3, frame 4, but, 3 or 4 zeros in front of the number depending. So, remove temporary files. Now, Maya has to cache this information, so if you don't check this box, it will save that information, which, depending on how you work, may be great. In my case, it's a waste of space, so I'd rather remove the temporary files, and I always check this, and then I want to save my file. You can put it wherever you want. I'm just going to save this one to the desktop. So let's take a look at what happens if we render without rendering off screen. So we click apply. So I'm going to click overwrite. Oh, actually, looks like that file was taken, so we'll just do version 2. So we'll click apply. So what happens is that Maya kind of takes over, shrinks down the window, and then tries to render the output. And then, of course, successfully saves. If we go to see what that play blast looks like, it plays quite nice. Much smoother. Much smoother, but it's pretty short. So you remember when I said, if we render off screen, it's better. Well, if we take a look at the render settings, and let's say we pick a crazy number like, well, I don't know, pretty large, larger than my screen resolution. Now this is a lot. Highly unusual, but very much wider than my screen. Definitely wider than this window. So if I click close, and I go to play blast, in fact, I'll go to another version, 3. If I don't click render off screen, watch what happens. Click apply. Now it creates a warning, and that warning is basically saying your resolution size is way too large for this window. Now we didn't have that problem before because the resolution fit actually perfectly inside this window, but because the width for this render is way larger, it forces us to actually push in what the max render size will be, which will be this window, and then the height will be slightly short. So if you render off screen, you won't have that issue. It'll render perfectly, no questions asked. So you will see that this is the max size of our play blast, and it is way smaller than 3000 pixels. So what I'm going to do is make sure that this is back to 960 by 540. And then if we go and click render off screen, oops. Click 4. And now our render is done. You can simply go to in here. Looks great, perfect. Obviously there's going to be aliasing issues with something like this, but in terms of playback and understanding what the animation looks like, you get that nice smoothness, and because this is a complex shader, Maya's not choking on playback because, well, this is now pre-rendered.